Hey, welcome to Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. This is a two-part series where we honor the memory and legacy of flight nurse Stacie Morse in partnership with ECHO Heliops, the First Responder Whiskey Society, Stacie's aunt Susan Morse deLucia, and her best friend Cindy Pratt. Flight nurse Stacie Morse, flight paramedic Margaret Langston, and pilot Patrick Coyle perished on January 29th, 2019, while responding to a call for a fixed-wing patient transport. As ECHO's second member from Alaska, Stacie was known as Alaska 2 and had a strong passion for learning. In addition, Stacie had a vast love for the outdoors and volunteered to better the community in which she lived. Stacie worked in various settings between the emergency department and ICU nursing before beginning her career as a flight nurse in Juneau, Alaska. Thank you to our sponsors Aero Brigham, Metro Aviation, and Robinson Helicopters. Again, thank you for joining us to honor the memory and legacy of flight nurse Stacie Morse, aka Alaska 2.
Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, John Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Shanley.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like they're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, through the shotgun, through something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
Good advising code 4 on the stop.
What's the one thing that was kind of unexpected that you would give some advice to when it comes to this topic? Cindy, we'll start with you.
If you think you're prepared, you're not. But there are people out there that care and understand, have been through it, and can relate. And they are the most caring people that you will ever find. You will make lifelong friends with them. And the pain never goes away. It gets easier to deal with.
John, I have thought about this a bunch of times, just in the way of, could I be any good to someone else that might go through something like this? But honestly, as Cindy said, there's absolutely no preparation. Like in a million years, even with statistics and the logic of plane crashes and stuff for med flights and everything, I would never have guessed in a million years this would happen. And even if you had told me it was going to happen, I would have said that if the plane crashed, she would swim to shore. Somewhere or another, she'd have all of them on her back, and she'd be swimming to shore. And, they'd find them a year later living with bears. I mean, I swear I would never have guessed this. There's absolutely no preparation, because I think that when this did happen, and I mentioned this before, that we were raised with very good coping skills of all circumstances, and this stripped us to the bone. We all, my two brothers, her father, and my brother Brian as well, and my husband and Brian's wife, this is just, our little family was just stripped to the core, not mentioning all of her family of friends, and they were just as close as all of us. I don't think there's anything I could tell anybody except you need to find support outside of what you thought was your support, because chances are that's not going to be there for you. Or at least, like you said, John, after 3 weeks. Like what ECHO has done for us and everybody, like Cindy and all of the friends, and they all stay in touch with us through their adventures and all that kind of stuff. But as far as coping, each person, it's so individualized, no preparation. And you kind of have to hit the bottom and then just work yourself up. And then you just kind of level out and try to find out what's going to work for you without just taking you back right down to the bottom every single day. And for us, I know from Stacie's dad, Tim, my brother, and my other brother, Brian, and of course, my husband and Brian's wife. We talk about it all the time, but we try to keep it on a happy note, the stories and the scholarships and all that kind of stuff. Because when you get too much into the truth of all of this, the biggest thing was never being able to bury her or any of them. It's devastating. I see people on TV and they've lost their child, they've lost their wife or whatever, but we all look at each other and say, at least they had someone to bury. We could never bring her home. That's something that is very hard to deal with. I think for most people that have lost loved ones and have not been able to bring them home, they would say the same thing. Again, ECHO has been a fantastic support for me. I love MB with all my heart. And, MB is my go-to girl, but there's so many, there's so many people. And again, all the friends like Cindy and Aaron and Kate and Maddie and Sammy. And I could name 100 of them. And now we're seeing all these women that were Stacie's best gals. They're all having children. And now they're using her name. They're her name is now going on with them. The Stacie and the Ray and, it's living on. And in that way, we're extremely grateful and truly blessed.
Absolutely. You touch on something that I think is important. We talk about, again, a long career and dealing with mental health issues that surround a long career. It's imperative to build a support network and group that can help in these situations. And Susan, like you said, you're not going to get support from the folks that you expected. It's going to come from the unexpected. And having access to resources like ECHO, me and my family go to church, and that's a big part of our life, and that's a big resource for us. And that's not for everybody, but having access to resources like that's really, really important. So I encourage folks to set those resources up and at least be aware of them, and for us in the industry, it's imperative for us to look at the folks around us. And if you know that your coworker is dealing with something, maybe make a suggestion. Be the person that says, hey, I noticed things aren't great. What's up? My good friend, RJ Garwood, he talks about the 5 mother effers. That's what I'll say it here. You got to have 5 people in your life that you can call at midnight and say, show up at this intersection with a shovel and an axe. And I'm not going to tell you what it's about, but the people you can count on basically to be there when you need them.
Yeah.
Whether that's to do, a physical job or just to hear you out. But it's important to have those 5 and to be that 5 for other folks. And that includes, having the intestinal fortitude when you know that something's not right, to challenge somebody, be like, hey, what's up? Something's not right. And, that's when you can pass the resources on. But I appreciate you guys being vulnerable and talking about this. I know it's really difficult, and it's beneficial for the folks that are listening to hear your story and hear how you guys have been impacted and the things that have been helpful for you. Because again, this is unfortunately an industry that is plagued with loss, and that's just something that probably won't change going forward. Again, thank you guys for that. Susan, you kind of talked a little bit about the fact that Stacie, her body wasn't recovered. She wasn't able to be buried. Can you go through the incident? Can you kind of walk us through what happened and what that whole investigation looked like?
Yeah, I can do my best. It's, I'll just touch on some of the points, but, they, on the day that it happened on the 29th of January, 2019, they had just flown in, they were headed to Cake, Alaska, and they had just come from Ted Stevens Airport in Anchorage. Everything seemed to be going okay. And I know that there were phone conversations and everything seemed above board, happy, regular stuff. And then about when they passed they were in between the last waypoint and the second to the last waypoint by Cake. And something happened then. The pilot had just remotely turned on the runway lights at Cake. He could do that remotely from the airplane. And he had turned those on. So they were about 10 miles out, I think. And he had communicated with them. And air traffic control had communicated back with him. And he'd asked for permission to land and all that type of stuff. And I believe it was about 1807. The air traffic control said change to an advisory frequency was approved. And the pilot said, okay, we're switching and have a good day, all good. And then just shortly after that, within about 10 minutes, things changed. About 1810, the plane kind of took a hard right turn toward the southerly heading. And then it began a pretty rapid descent. They were losing about 2,500 feet of altitude in 14 seconds. So it was very rapid. The last radar point was at 1810, 6:10 at night, when the airplane was about at the 1,300 foot level. I think their heading was like 143 degrees and a ground speed of 174 knots. And then about that time, they had 14 seconds before they hit the water. Nobody witnessed that at all. There was nothing to see there, but a gal that was meeting him for the medical emergency in Cake said, as she had driven up earlier to meet the airplane, that she had observed that the pilot-controlled lights were on the runway, that they were illuminated, and that was about 1809. And then after 10 minutes, when they didn't come, that's when she called Guardian to let them know the plane did not come. We had a lot of people on the ground there per se, but Cake's so remote that everything's so far away, and they don't have a lot of resources there, great people, but not a lot of resources. So I know that at about 1845, so you're talking almost 45 minutes later, the FAA was notified for sure, and an extensive search was launched. The United States Coast Guard was involved, the Petersburg Search and Rescue, Alaska State Troopers, Cake Search and Rescue, Alaska Marine Highway ferries, and numerous Good Samaritans from around the area. I mean, there were people that went from Juneau up there and from Sitka around, just private fishermen and stuff looking for whatever they could find.
Thanks to our sponsor, Aero Brigham. Aero Brigham is the clear choice for law enforcement, search and rescue, aerial firefighting, and special mission completions across helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft. Explore our offerings at aerobrigham.com. Committed to supporting and elevating our first responders. It's not just our specialty, it's our passion.
And then the next day, they didn't find anything that day, obviously. And then on the next day, there was airplane debris that was located about 22 miles west of Cake. And it was floating pretty much on the surface of the water near Point Gardner in the Chatham Strait. The one thing was the airplane had been equipped with a CVR, a cockpit voice recorder. But they're not mandated to be on those airplanes. At this time, it wasn't a law, it wasn't a regulation, let me say, that they had to have them. It was just when the plane was purchased, it had one in it. But it hadn't been used since 2015. So there was no usable information. Daily, they were searching from the 29th until I have written down on my calendar that they stopped the search by boat on the 27th of March. And I kid you not, in all of that time, there was something going every day. I mean, there was a lot of boat travel to the area to get them situated because we had arranged for like little submarines, rovers to go down. There was a lot of exchange on that. Some, you just never know till you get there at 500 feet, even though that doesn't seem very deep. There's a lot of action at every 100-foot level. The tide changes, the clarity, and, the animals, everything. And so it was very hard to navigate things, but with a group effort and a lot of input from great people, I think for the circumstances, we found the best we could for that time. And it was, quite some time before we actually found the plane itself. And so by that time, the chances of ever finding a body intact were zero. Between the bacteria in the water in Alaska and the type of fish that are around there, there's no way that there would be anything survivable. Not survivable, but just to be found, just a recovery. That's pretty much the basic report that we had to live with for a couple of years, I guess. There wasn't a lot to work with. Of the plane that they did find, they brought up quite a bit on the sonar that they used. When they found the plane, it was, kind of in one location and everything. And they were able to find like a piece of the cockpit and they found a left wing and a left inboard flap, a right wing, more flaps, a stabilizer. One interesting thing, and I always go back to this. I don't know what it means, but it's just in the back of my head, and that was that they recovered the cockpit flight crew seats, both seats, and the seat belt restraints were found unbuckled, and one passenger seat from the back was recovered, and the seat belt restraint was found unbuckled. They found a base of another seat. However, no seat back or seat restraint was recovered. I kind of focused on the seat stuff, and I don't know, I believe in my heart that something happened on board, some kind of maybe a medical thing, or maybe just something happened mechanically, medically. We have no idea, because the NTSB report basically said for what they found of what they found, they felt like they could not come to a solid conclusion on why it happened. There wasn't enough evidence to say conclusively what caused it. They couldn't say it was a pilot error or a crew error because there were no bodies to do toxicology or pathology. The parts that they did find of the plane seemed to be in working order. I think there was only one thing that was a little bit off, and it was like the asymmetric flap or something. It was like 10% off of what it should have been, but it could have been caused by just the crash itself and the impairment of the cables and the actuators themselves. So there was no conclusive thing. It just all came down to nobody was going to have someone to bury. That's what it basically came down to for us. And the NTSB, there is no more. There isn't a further report. This is it. The weather was pretty decent. They had a 10-mile visibility. I think there was some light precipitation, but it was at different levels. You know how they do it at like the 5,000-foot level, they'll have a precipitation, and then 2,500 and so. But when they got down past that 2,500, it was pretty decent, you know. So we just will never know what happened.
I imagine from the family perspective, that's difficult to deal with. The unknown is always what's challenging. And you know, like you said, there's no witnesses, there's no mechanical evidence because a lot of that was disrupted during the crash. There's no voice cockpit recorder. So yeah, was it? If I remember correctly, was it 48 days that they spent searching for the wreckage?
Yeah, 41 or 48. I can't remember.
41, and maybe it was 41.
Yeah, it was forever.
As you know, family and friends, that must have seemed like an eternity. You know, waiting and hoping for something different. You know.
Oh, and every day we had a conference call with the people that ran the search and a guardian and the other families. Everybody had a certain person that would listen and try to, you know, help if they possibly could, if they knew something. I mean, you know, a lot of it came down to people talking and who you know, where you are, who has expertise in this area. Do you know anybody? And there was also no flight data recorder either. So, which also wasn't required. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff I wish that they would mandate to be on these planes, regardless of the seating capacity. Because I think when you're an air medical transport company, I think it's really important that you put the patient first. And in this situation, even though there wasn't per se a patient on board, it's still your crew. And I think that, you know, in the days to come, that's something that I'm going to lobby for, is to make sure that these smaller air med flights are equipped with these things, so we know where we can do better, or what to change. You know, like we have no idea. The plane, it never had any sign of even an explosion or fire, nothing like that.
Well, going forward, there's been a scholarship fund that's been created in her name, and that's really great that her legacy continues. You know, he talked about Susan and Cindy, how infectious her personality was, her sense of adventure and ambition. And it's, I guess, fitting that there's been a scholarship fund created in her name and in her honor. MB, can you talk about what that scholarship looks like and what some of the criteria is for that scholarship?
So right after the crash, the idea of the scholarship came up. And Stacie is the first ECHO member that we've lost in a line of duty event. It was a sobering event, I think, for everybody. You get up every day, you tell yourself, you're going to work. We're safe. We do things. I'm not complacent, and it's not going to happen to us. And it happened to us. And what can we do to honor her in a way that is meaningful? And the idea of the scholarship quickly came up, and it kind of got tasked to the FAST team to make sure that there was always somebody taking care of it and keeping an eye on it and really being a steward of it. And that's when I got involved and met Susan. And it's really important to us that we do have the family's input. These decisions are not made by a board of directors or by a committee. I talk to Susan regularly about the scholarship and, have the family's input. Susan's the spokesperson, but it does get shared with the entire family. And, we don't do anything without the family's consent, because we want to make sure that we are maintaining the integrity of the scholarship and ensuring that we are truly honoring Stacie's memory and her legacy. And I think the best way to do that is to really have the strong family commitment and involvement that we have. And I just want to say, Susan, you have been so lovely to work with. And, it's really been an honor to be in the position that I'm in and to get to know you and the family. And you are part of my family as well now. Like,
thanks, Abby.
Kind of like an STI, I'll go away for a little while, but I'm coming back.
Let's talk about Nocto's humor. That's a perfect example right there.
Exactly. And that's why Susan and I think have bonded so well. She creates, my Jersey abrasiveness can be off-putting to some people, but Susan has very much embraced it.
Definitely so.
So we were like, what can we do to really honor Stacie?
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned air medical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completions Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs, including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
We decided that it needed to be focused at education, and it needed to be focused at someone who was really passionate about the same things that Stacie was passionate about. So first and foremost, it has to be a nurse or someone who's pursuing a career in nursing with a goal of becoming a flight nurse. And then we look for someone who shares other traits that Stacie has, that really fierce, like, I'm going to do this. No one's getting in my way. I don't care what the odds are type of person. And then we look for the other attributes of Stacie, the, just fierce independence and, being in a rugged area and just the commitment that she had to her community. So people that are serving in communities that don't have a lot of resources, are score higher in the matrix, because it really embodies what Stacie was passionate about, like serving her local community and then really immersing herself in that culture with the hunting and the hiking and the fishing and the snowboarding and all the outdoor stuff that goes with it. So the scholarship is really aimed at there is a monetary award that goes with it of $2,500, and that is to be applied to some type of education, whether it's an actual college class or some type of class for certification for flight nursing, but it has to be towards education. And the other part of the scholarship is they are given membership to ECHO. To be an ECHO member, you have to be an active flight crew member. And this is the one exception. If you do win the scholarship and you're not already flying, then you do get to become an ECHO member and you get to attend an ECHO conference. And we try to get them into as many classes as we can. Some of the pre-conference stuff, we also try to get them into, like the water egress training is a big one that we try to get them into to kind of give them a taste of what is involved with flight. Because these are the things that like you don't know before you get in the industry, that we're going to strap you into the fuselage of an old aircraft and we're going to dunk you into ice cold water and you need to get yourself out on a breath hold. Like it's very sobering and eye-opening. And you know, for some people, maybe that is the time where they're like, okay, maybe I don't want to fly. And for other people, that's the one that really hooks them in. They're like, oh no, I'm doing this. Sign me up. We look for people that are over 21, just because we're bringing them to the conference. You know, we need, and you know, with the moonshine that goes on, we need to make sure everyone's legal. And the other thing is, we want people that are promoting themselves, but also looking for excellence. So we look for a GPA of at least 3.0, and they need to be working at the same time, because Stacie was always working while she was pushing herself through school. So we look for the high GPAs, as well as, you know, that they're still actively working and supporting themselves. And I think I talked about, like, it can be for like BSN if they want to go for their NP, because Stacie was working on her NP at the time of her death, or if they're just, you know, in nursing school and want to pursue flight.
Well, that's awesome. The fact that her legacy continues is great. She's obviously an impactful person. Her adventure and ambition was a big part of that. These scholarships, they don't fund themselves, you know, and I'd kind of like to talk about how we can support those scholarships, because that's really important to continue to do that. Nick, I'll shift to you real quick with the memorial bottle that you guys have created. Can you talk about where you can buy that, what that looks like, and whatnot?
The way that we do all of our charity bottles has kind of morphed over the years. And we came out of a love of whiskey, of always just buying different single barrels and actually committing and buying an entire barrel. And then from there, trying to upcharge it to raise money for these different projects. The beauty of working with Liberty Call Distillery, who's been a fantastic partner. And that's actually the nexus of kind of how we met you, John, as well, because one of my mentors within the distillery, his name was Robbie Centinello. He used to fly for Marine One. They have their own distillery. In addition to that, they have their own custom engraving process as well. So from there, we can kind of create a print-on-demand model for just any type of project. So for Stacie's project, we worked with ECHO to create the design, and then we pushed it out. The bottle is $100, and of the net proceeds, we get $20 back per bottle sold, and 100% of that goes to the scholarship. I just checked. I think it's been up for a couple weeks. We've raised about $1,300 so far.
Wow, that's great.
And you can go and check out the website, which is servicethroughspirits.com. And that is just the retailer that we happen to work with. And you can also find it, of course, through our Instagram or our Facebook group, First Responder Whiskey Society. And the beauty of that is the bottle will always be up until it'll always be up. So we can always just continue to raise money for the scholarship.
For folks that don't live in California, is that bottle available outside of California or only in California?
It is available for 42 states. So there are some states that we cannot ship to, and it's for legal reasons. And unfortunately, Alaska is actually one of them. So I think it's Alaska, Hawaii, which is, I think it's just, they have some weird laws out there. It's actually pretty far. But as long as you have someone that can live in an alternate state that can get it to you, you can work that out. Some of the other states we don't ship to are Utah, I think because of the Mormons, Kentucky, because they have the lockdown on whiskey, and then Alabama.
For the corporate sponsors, MB and Travis, I know there's a lot of corporate sponsors out there that are looking for ways to contribute to meaningful projects like this. Can you talk about how they can get in touch with you guys and how they can contribute to this scholarship fund?
Sure. So on our website, and Travis, you can jump in at any point because you do a lot of our website stuff. We have a link to Stacie's scholarship, and there is a donate to the scholarship fund button that you can always click and do a cash donation at the conference. Like I said, ECHO started as grassroots. We still kind of do a lot of grassroots things. So at our conference every year, we run an auction, like a tricky tray. So if anybody wants to donate any items to that, we raise a majority of our funds through that, not just for Stacie, but also for the FAST team itself. And then just having great sponsors for the conference itself for ECHO helps us because, if we have a deployment or the scholarship, fund is running low, ECHO always, steps up to the plate and makes sure that we're one of the first things that's fully funded. And because of, what we do, it is a priority for them, it's awesome to have that type of support and know that you have the backing of so many people. It's helpful.
The only thing I would add is that the memorial bottle is on our homepage on the website with a link to purchase it, as well as a link directly to our scholarship page for Stacie that details, who Stacie was, why the scholarship exists, and on that page is the donate link. In addition to that, we have monthly donation programs where people can direct their funds. And I would say currently about 60% of our donors direct their funds directly to the scholarship. So funding that project is typically never an issue for us. And lastly, as part of our conference registration process, we have a donation option, and people can direct their funds directly to the scholarship through that as well.
Yeah, you guys do a lot of really cool fundraising. You did a great fundraising project for a flight paramedic or a HIMSS pilot actually this last year who crashed and wasn't able to work, and you guys were able to put a really cool fundraiser together for him. So really appreciate what you guys are doing in the industry as far as the fundraising stuff goes. So thank you for that. I know you guys just announced this next year's conference. Can you touch on that just a little bit before we close out?
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability, so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
Yeah, sure. This year we're going back to the East Coast. We're going to be in Richmond, Virginia. It's nice to go back to the East Coast, kind of where it all started. And perhaps this year we will bring back some moonshine shots.
An honor. Yeah, I love it.
Hey, John, before you shut down, I wanted to circle back on two things, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
When you had asked Cindy and Susan about the unexpected from a family perspective, is it okay if I kind of share like a fast perspective on that?
Yeah, that'd be great.
What we've noticed from the deployments that we've done, especially for the families, is that there's not been a lot of communication between the provider and their family. And then that poor communication continues between the service and the family because the family doesn't really know what to expect. So what we recommend to everyone is that when you start flying, and every year that you fly, you need to sit down with your family and your loved ones, and you need to have that conversation that you have that potential of not coming home. Not to scare them, and to reassure them that, yes, I do what I need to do every day, but we're flying in things that were never meant to leave the ground, especially, if you're doing rotor. And to prepare your family, like, in case the worst things happen. Like, what can they expect? 20 years ago, you got a knock on your door and someone told you that there was, an aircraft missing and your loved one was on it and they were searching. And that doesn't happen now. You're going to find out through social media. There's no way your employer, whether they want to or not, is going to be able to make notification before social media does. And and that's a terrible way for family to find out. And it's one of the most heartbreaking things that we see on fast deployments is that family are finding out that their loved ones are either killed or missing through social media. And, social media has good and bad points, and this is definitely one of the bad points. But have that conversation with your family so that they're not angry because they found out on Facebook, because you can't outrun social media. It's just impossible. And then to know, okay, if something bad is going down, I need to shut down all my social media and wait for the knock on the door and take your direction and get your information from the service and not from social media, because we all know how accurate it is. And once that seed is planted, it's really hard to refocus a family onto what the truth is and what the process is going to be. And the other important thing is, as a clinician, you need to hold your service responsible to have an updated and accurate PAIP. And it needs to be tested yearly. We see that the PAIPs, will fail and the information is not getting out at all or in a timely fashion sometimes. And that becomes a big source of tension for the survivors and for the families. So really, be involved. Make sure you know what your PAIP is. Explain the PAIP process to your family so they know what to expect, like who's going to be calling them. Make sure that your contact information is up to date. So your employer is calling a phone number you had 10 years ago because you never updated it. Or they're calling your ex-spouse because you never changed that you got divorced, and your new spouse is, finding out through your kids because your ex is telling the kids now, so part of it really has to be your responsibility to maintain, your up-to-date contact. We do have on the ECHO website, if you go to the FAST page, we do have a line of duty death form that's very comprehensive, down to the fact, like, do you live alone? Who do we contact? Are they out of state? Do you have animals that, someone's going to have to go and get so that, your dog's not home for 4 days before somebody realizes that it's, not been taken care of. It's all things we don't ever want to think about, but you need to have that conversation. You need to have that conversation with your family. You need to have that conversation with your coworkers, because if the worst case scenario happens, you don't want to leave them holding the bag, and that's really the way that you have to explain it to people, because they don't want to talk about it. No, it's bad juju if you talk about it. No, it's bad juju, if you don't have a plan.
Right.
Like and I would never want to put, my loved ones through that experience of not knowing what to do. Like, where do you keep everything? Like, so in my locker, I have a letter and I have my line of duty death form, and Lou knows that it's there. And if something bad happens, he knows where to go to get the information. And then he doesn't have to make any decisions. Like, everything I want is very clearly worded so that he doesn't have to make any decisions, because you kind of shut down at that time, and making a decision is extremely difficult. And he also knows like what to kind of expect, who's going to be calling him, what the process is, that he's not going to have answers, that there's a potential that he's not going to have a funeral. At the very end of my letter to him is an apology that this letter is opened. But that makes me feel better knowing that I get to say that to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I feel like it's a little bit more protection on my part also. And then the one other point that I wanted to talk about, you talked about aviation and not getting support in events. Even with FAST, we found that pilots and mechanics are super tough. You guys are in a really hard situation when there's an aviation event, because anything you say can be used as evidence. So a lot of times the pilots and the mechanics will not even talk to the FAST members. I'll feign, ignorance or amnesia, whatever, Alzheimer's. They're like, oh, I never talked to that guy. I don't remember, if anybody approaches me. But they're not going to trust their career and their livelihood and potential jail time because they said something to you. So what FAST started in 2001 is we've introduced therapy dogs to our team. And they've deployed a couple times now. And they've really made a difference with the pilots and the mechanics. We let the dogs off on a long lead so that we're not close to them. it gives at least them the ability to have some type of close contact with another living creature that can feel and show empathy and make them at least feel like they're getting some type of support. Unfortunately, right now we only have the dogs on the East Coast because they are not service dogs. They are therapy dogs. It's hard for us to get them across country, unless we're driving them, and that's not really realistic at the time frame that we want to be deployable. We are working on getting dogs across the country. It's a slow process. But my recommendation would be to any agency out there, like, start making that connection now with any type of therapy animals in your coverage area. A lot of them will come out for free for public safety, anything. So a lot of times they'll waive their fees. And if you have a relationship with them before an event happens, they're more likely to come out on an emergency visit. So at least you can, provide some comfort for your crews that don't feel comfortable talking.
Yeah, I think that's great. Talking oftentimes isn't what you want to do, but a dog is pretty universally accepted by everybody, and it's very comforting, and I love that you guys are doing that. That's great. Good advice. Don't wait till something happens when you need something before you reach out now and make those connections. And that's something that can be useful later. Before we close out, Susan and Cindy, I'd like to go back to you guys just to follow up on what MB said in her last kind of statement here and conversation about, the resources and whatnot. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
For myself, it's kind of like what I said before. I realize now how important that they are in our lives, and how I didn't even know what or who they were before, until I learned about Alaska too, Stacie, and ECHO. I didn't even know it existed. And so that type of information I do share, because that is important to the people that are still left in the industry, that are still part of our group of people, our family and friends. And I think everybody that went through this knows that now. I think maybe the family, I think the coworkers were better informed about it, or the people that were in the industry were a little better informed about it than the families themselves. And so we were the real lucky ones about that, at least as far as luck goes, about having some extremely wonderful support.
Yeah. Cindy, for you?
For me, I trust the FAST team with anything and everything. I was very fortunate to have all the connections that I did and do have. And I can't, like I said, I couldn't speak more highly of them. But at the time, I was very fortunate to have that whole team on my side.
Yeah, the impact you guys are making is huge. The support you offer is a big part of that. So thank you guys for that, for what you're providing for the industry, for the families, the friends, the whole support network that surrounds our industry, because that support network is pretty big, So thank you guys for that. Before we close out, Nick, do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, thank you so much for letting me be a part of this. It's not just meaningful to just be a part of it, but it's hearing the stories and being able to share a drink and just learn about Stacie and learn about her life. It's really, John is officer with, you used to be in San Diego PD, and you did, 30-year career in law enforcement. And, we can be pretty unemotional at times. Being able to just sit down and learn about someone who's so amazing, and at the same time be sad that I will never get to meet her. But also hear about how amazing she was, and the fact that we're all gathered here to talk about how we can just raise a whole nother generation of flight nurses. It has significance.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And that's meaningful to me, being involved in any type of way. And you will always have our support.
Yeah, that's huge. Travis?
Yeah, Nick, I think, man, you put it perfect. I'll speak on behalf of ECHO as a whole, and just know that we first and foremost appreciate the vulnerability and willingness to share and have this discussion, but more so allowing us to be a part of y'all's journey and be a part of y'all's life is such an honor. Anything that we as ECHO and a collective air medical community can do to honor her and advocate for safety and best practices and community going forward is something that we're all steadfast committed to.
Yeah, it's pretty cool when you look at who's here in this conversation. You know, it's like Nick brought up earlier, pretty diverse group from different backgrounds, but we're all here for the common cause of Stacie and what she represents in our industry, you know, and I think she kind of embodies the people the person that we want to be, right? Always out there helping somebody, whether it's at work or outside of work, and that sense of adventure, that sense of just ambition to better yourself is really neat. So it's been an honor and a privilege to be a part of this conversation, to hear about her life through Susan and Cindy and MB. And just thank you guys for, again, being vulnerable, for sharing about who she was and what she's done and the way she's impacted people's lives. That's really great. These are the kind of conversations that I think are most powerful. And this is why I love doing what we get to do and sharing these stories. So thank you guys. And I'm looking forward to cheersing, I guess, moonshine. We've made it a thing now at this next ECHO conference. And we'll do that in honor of Stacie. So until then, I appreciate you guys and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you so much.
All right. Cheers.
Thank you all.
Cheers.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks. Cheers.
This is the end of part 2 of our conversation honoring and remembering Stacie Morse. Thank you for joining us for this impactful episode. After a word from our sponsors, we'll have another segment of Ask the Expert. If you have a question you'd like answered, go to verticalhelicast.com, find the contact page. You can then submit a question in the topic or idea text box. Cheers.
Thanks to our sponsor, Aero Brigham. Aero Brigham is the clear choice for law enforcement, search and rescue, aerial firefighting, and special mission completions across helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft. Explore our offerings at aerobrigham.com. Committed to supporting and elevating our first responders. It's not just our specialty, it's our passion. Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned air medical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completions Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs, including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors. Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability, so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
Thanks again for supporting our sponsors and for joining us for another episode of Ask the Expert. For this question, I placed a phone call to our friend and Hangar Z co-host, Brian Smith, to answer the question of, can you talk about the importance of properly wearing your flame-resistant flight gear in flight? Is this the Brian Smith?
It's one of them.
Now, is it B-R-I-A-N or B-R-Y-A-N? I know there's a difference.
It's B-R-Y. Because with a name like Brian Smith, you got to do something to try and spice it up.
Well, hey, I'm calling you. We talked about doing an Ask the Expert session, and this is that. So we had a listener write in asking about the importance of properly wearing your flame-resistant flight gear in flight. When I thought about doing this segment, you know, you're the first person that comes to mind when it comes to safety. And in fact, in your safety class, I remember going through a PPE portion. So if you could, just walk us through some of your thoughts when it comes to the importance of wearing FR flight gear.
Yeah, and I think one of the first issues is a misunderstanding of what we're wanting to get the end effect of wearing the PPE. And people tend to just think of like post crash, that flash fire right after the crash, and they're trying to run away, which is part of it. But we're also looking at in-flight emergency, and there's a lot of things that can happen in the cockpit, electrical fires and things like that happen right in front of us in that panel and around us with all the equipment we have on, that we're going to have to deal with in the cockpit with whatever we have on, and be able to still manipulate the controls and radios and do all of the stuff that are going to be required to get to the ground safely in the middle of fire. If we're on the ground, then yes, we want to get ourselves out of the aircraft and stay protected from any of the fire that might come up, both electrical and that engine fuel-based fire that can come from broken fuel lines that happen with a crash, broken fuel tanks. There's a lot of places where fuel can be coming out of that aircraft, in many cases very close to the occupant, and not just fuel, but also other flammable liquids, hydraulics and all the other things that we carry in the aircraft. So you not only need to have this stuff on, but it has to stay on.
Right.
And, if, with like boots and some things like that, if what is holding to the boot's going to come off, the gloves are going to come, helmet's going to come off before you get a chance to get the aircraft. So with that in mind, remember that the whole PPE ensemble is a system, and it's, for it to work right, it requires all the pieces of the system. The flight suit's not going to work great to protect even your arms and your torso if your gloves aren't on, or if it isn't zipped up. It's not going to protect your neck if the collar isn't flipped up. The helmet is not going to protect your head if you're wearing it so loose, or the chin strap isn't buckled. It's just going to roll right off your head as soon as you hit, and in many cases cause more damage. The boots, it's, the flight suit has holes in it that you have to plug with the boots and the gloves and the helmet, and, and also what you're wearing under it. You can have a great flight suit, but if you have synthetic material underneath, it's not really going to help. It requires either do it right or you don't. And there's not a lot of middle ground. And you start cutting corners, you start removing pieces of it because you don't like it or because it's not comfortable, you're going to lose the overall effect that you're hoping for, which is to protect yourself in the aircraft, allow yourself to continue to fly to get it to the ground, and then get not only yourself out, but also get other occupants out.
Like I had mentioned to you, prior to taking your class, I was not very disciplined about wearing my gloves properly in flight. A lot of times I'd take them off after departure, and they'd go in my helmet when we landed. And, after taking your class and going through, some of the photos and stories of the folks that were involved in fire-related incidents, I was pretty good after that about wearing my gloves and even popping my collar, when it comes to the flight suit top.
And I understand, sometimes it's not the most comfortable thing, right? Fly in Florida, it's blazing hot in the summer. The gloves, if it truly is inhibiting like TFOs from doing their job and you have to take them off, that's understandable, but take them off when you're at altitude doing the job. When you're taking off and landing and you're near the ground, put them back on, because if something happens, you're not going to have time to get those back on. For the pilots, the argument doesn't stand. You're going to be at the controls all the way to the ground. You're not going to have time to put pieces of PPE back in place that you chose to remove after the engine fails or something like that. So I guess is a snippet in the summary. You have to think about protecting yourself from fire in the cockpit for the time it will take you to deal with an emergency and get to the ground.
Right.
Then after that, also that it protects you and it stays on as you get out of the aircraft, get your crew out of the aircraft and get safely away from it. And it's not going to work if you don't have all the pieces in place. Otherwise, you're going to have big holes. It'd be like having a bulletproof vest that was modular and only wearing a couple pieces of it instead of it blocking and protecting your whole torso.
Right.
It makes holes in the system. It's going to prevent the whole system from working, not just that one part that you choose not to wear correctly.
Yeah, I like the analogy of it being a system because it truly is. And most people, including myself, up until taking your safety course, didn't think about it like that. So yeah, in order for the system to properly operate, you've got to have all the elements in place. Brian, I'd like to thank you for allowing us to call you and put you on the spot for the Ask the Expert. I know you've got a lot to say, and this again could be a topic it is a topic for you that's multi-day. So the fact that you could come in less than 10 minutes and give us some information on that is key. So thank you very much. And for those that haven't taken his safety course at AppsCon, I highly recommend. You're going to be teaching that again this next year?
Right now, as far as I know, yes. And APSA has also asked me to teach it at HeliExpo coming up in February. So I'll be there teaching the class as well.
Okay. Well, look forward to both HAI and AppsCon. And thank you, Brian. We'll catch you later.
Thank you, John. Always a pleasure.
Yes, sir. Cheers.
Time to close up the Hangar. Thanks for joining us on the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts.